Learn to observe without reacting. Buddhist wisdom. The human mind is restless by nature. It is constantly chasing after stimuli, reacting to every thought, every word, and every external event that crosses its path. In this state of perpetual reaction, we lose the ability to simply observe. We get caught in the web of desires, fears, judgments, and attachments, and the more entangled we become, the less peace we experience. Buddhism, with its timeless teachings, offers a radical yet simple antidote to this restless condition: the cultivation of observation without reaction. This practice is not about suppressing emotions or denying experiences. It is about learning to see life with clarity, detachment, and deep understanding. To observe without reacting is to create a gap between stimulus and response, to rest in awareness instead of being dragged into the storm of impulsive reactions. It is to recognize that every thought is just a thought, every sensation is just a sensation, and every event is just a passing phenomenon in the vast field of consciousness. This wisdom is not abstract philosophy. It is a practice that transforms the way we live, interact, and understand ourselves. The ability to observe without reacting allows us to break free from the cycle of suffering. It prevents us from fueling anger with more anger, fear with more fear, or craving with more craving. Instead, it gives us the strength to face reality as it is, without coloring it with our projections or illusions. From this state of presence and balance, compassion naturally arises, patience grows, and the mind finds rest in the stillness of being. In the following chapters, we will explore in depth what it truly means to observe without reacting, why it is central to Buddhist wisdom, and how one can practice it in everyday life. We will walk through the roots of reactivity, the cultivation of mindfulness, the importance of equanimity, and the liberating power of simply watching without clinging or resisting. This is not an easy journey, for the habit of reaction is deeply ingrained in human conditioning. Yet it is one of the most rewarding journeys, because through it we rediscover the essence of freedom. The roots of reaction, why the mind cannot stay still. Reactivity is one of the fundamental characteristics of the untrained mind. It is as if the mind is a pond, constantly disturbed by stones being thrown into it. Instead of allowing the ripples to settle, we toss more stones, more judgments, and more resistance. To understand why observing without reacting is so challenging, we must first uncover the roots of reaction. The first root lies in craving and aversion, what Buddhism calls tanha, thirst. Human beings are perpetually seeking what they desire and rejecting what they dislike. Every experience is filtered through this dual lens. I want more of this, or I want less of that. This craving and aversion create the constant urge to react, to interfere, to control the flow of life. When pleasure arises, we cling to it. When pain arises, we resist it. In both cases, we lose our capacity to simply observe, and in losing observation, we lose peace. Another root of reaction is ignorance, avidya. We often fail to see reality as it is. Instead, we see it through the fog of concepts, stories, and illusions. We do not observe a person as they are. We observe them through the projections of our expectations, fears, and judgments. We do not experience a sensation as a bare sensation. We experience it as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, desirable or undesirable. This ignorance leads to automatic reactivity, because instead of meeting reality, we are reacting to our interpretation of it. There is also the deeply ingrained conditioning of habit. From the moment we are born, we are taught to react. If we cry, we get attention. If we smile, we are rewarded. If we fail, we are corrected. Our nervous system develops patterns of reactivity, linking certain triggers to certain responses. By the time we become adults, these patterns are so entrenched that they seem automatic, unconscious. A harsh word triggers anger, a compliment triggers pride, a memory triggers sorrow, and so on. These habitual reactions prevent us from seeing clearly and trap us in cycles of suffering. Fear is another powerful root of reaction. Fear makes the mind restless, always preparing for danger, always seeking security. When fear arises, we rarely pause to observe it. We instantly react, either by fleeing, fighting, or freezing. Fear clouds perception and fuels impulsivity. It prevents us from staying with the present moment because it constantly projects us into an imagined future of threat. Finally, the ego itself is a source of reaction. The ego thrives on identification, on taking everything personally. A simple word from another person becomes an insult because the ego interprets it as an attack. A failure becomes unbearable because the ego feels diminished. The ego cannot allow life to flow without interference because its very survival depends on grasping, defending, and asserting itself. Thus it reacts endlessly, protecting its fragile sense of identity. When we look at these roots of reaction, craving, aversion, ignorance, habit, fear, and ego, we begin to understand why observing without reacting is so rare. The mind is like a monkey, constantly jumping from branch to branch, unable to sit still. Yet, Buddhist wisdom tells us that the monkey can be trained. Through awareness, meditation, and practice, we can learn to create space between stimulus and response. In that space, we rediscover freedom. The training begins with awareness. To observe the roots of reaction is itself the first step to freedom. When craving arises, simply note, craving is here. When aversion arises, note, aversion is here. When fear arises, note, fear is here. This noting practice, simple as it may seem, is revolutionary. Instead of being swept away by the reaction, we shine the light of awareness on it. In that light, reactivity begins to lose its power. Over time, the mind learns that it does not need to react to every stimulus. Just as a fire dies out when it is not fed, reactions lose their strength when we stop fueling them with identification. This does not mean becoming passive or indifferent, it means becoming free. Instead of reacting out of habit or fear, we respond with clarity and wisdom. The pond of the mind becomes still, reflecting reality as it is, without distortion. This first step, understanding the roots of reaction, is essential because without it, we will always be fighting against symptoms rather than addressing the cause. If we try to stop reacting without understanding why we react, our effort will be superficial and short-lived. But when we see the roots clearly, our practice gains depth. We begin to recognize that observing without reacting is not just a technique. It is a way of transforming the very structure of the mind. Therefore, let us continue this journey into Buddhist wisdom, understanding that every reaction has a root, and every root can be illuminated by awareness. In this light, the restless mind finds rest, and the path to liberation opens before us. If you find this exploration meaningful, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, so together we can continue walking the path of wisdom and inner freedom. The power of mindfulness in breaking the cycle of reaction. Mindfulness is the heart of Buddhist practice, the jewel that makes it possible to step out of reactivity and into the clear light of awareness. To understand the depth of observing without reacting, one must enter fully into the spirit of mindfulness. It is not merely a technique or a passing trend. It is the direct experience of presence, the act of inhabiting this moment with full awareness, without clinging to it or pushing it away. Mindfulness transforms the way we live because it gives us the ability to see the mechanics of the mind in real time. When we are mindful, we begin to perceive the birth of a thought, the unfolding of an emotion, and the subtle movements of desire and fear. We no longer live on automatic pilot, reacting to every stimulus unconsciously. Instead, we awaken to the fact that between the stimulus and our reaction, there is a space, and in that space lies the possibility of freedom. At its core, mindfulness is about observation. The Buddha taught that life is a constant flow of arising and passing phenomena. Thoughts arise, sensations arise, emotions arise, perceptions arise, and all of them pass away. Nothing is permanent. Everything is in flux. Yet because of our lack of mindfulness, we take these passing phenomena as solid and real, and in clinging to them, we suffer. When we cultivate mindfulness, we begin to watch the play of life without immediately identifying with it. A thought is just a thought, not the truth. An emotion is just an emotion, not who we are. A sensation is just a sensation, not a permanent reality. This shift in perception allows us to observe without reacting, to rest in awareness instead of being dragged by the current. The practice of mindfulness is deceptively simple. One sits, breathes, and observes. At first, the mind rebels, restless and impatient. Thoughts bombard the field of awareness, and the instinct is to chase them, to react to them. But the practice is to return again and again to the simple act of observation, to anchor oneself in the breath, in the body, in the present moment. As we practice, we discover something extraordinary. We do not need to follow every thought. We do not need to act on every impulse. We can watch the arising of anger without fueling it, the arising of fear without being consumed by it, the arising of desire without becoming its slave. This is the freedom mindfulness offers. The transformative power of mindfulness lies in its ability to slow down the automatic chain of reaction. Normally, when an unpleasant sensation arises, we instantly react with aversion. When a pleasant sensation arises, we instantly react with craving. This chain is so fast that we are rarely aware of it. But with mindfulness, we bring light to this process. We begin to notice, here is the sensation, here is the craving, here is the aversion. And in that noticing, the chain is broken. We realize that we have a choice. We do not need to react. We can simply observe, let the sensation be, and watch it pass away. This is not suppression, but liberation, because it restores our power over the mind. The Buddha compared mindfulness to a guard at the gate of a city. The guard does not fight with the people entering and leaving. He simply observes them, noting who comes and who goes. In the same way, mindfulness does not suppress thoughts or emotions. It simply watches them, noting their presence. This watchfulness prevents the mind from being carried away. It creates the space for wisdom to arise. When anger is observed with mindfulness, it loses its grip. When fear is observed, it loses its sharpness. When desire is observed, it loses its intoxication. Mindfulness exposes all phenomena for what they are: impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. The cultivation of mindfulness also reveals the subtle impermanence of experience. When we observe closely, we see that every sensation changes from moment to moment. A pain in the body arises, stays for a while and passes. A joyful feeling arises, stays for a while and passes. A thought arises, stays for a while and passes. Everything is in constant motion, arising and dissolving like waves on the ocean. This direct experience of impermanence changes the way we relate to life. We realize that there is no need to cling or to resist, because everything is transient. This realization is the foundation of equanimity, the ability to stay balanced in the midst of change. But mindfulness is not only a practice for the meditation cushion, it is a way of living. To observe without reacting in daily life means to bring mindfulness into every moment. When someone insults us, instead of reacting with anger, we observe the sensation in the body, the thoughts in the mind, the impulse to strike back. We notice them with awareness, and in doing so we create the possibility of choosing a wiser response. When we feel desire, instead of rushing to satisfy it, we pause, observe the craving as a sensation, and notice how it changes when we do not feed it. When fear arises, instead of being overwhelmed, we bring mindfulness to the body, feeling the contraction, the heartbeat, the breath, and we stay with the experience without fleeing. In this way, mindfulness becomes the bridge between reactivity and freedom. The practice deepens as we begin to see not only the contents of the mind, but also the nature of the observer itself. Who is it that is observing? When we look deeply, we see that awareness is not personal. It is not my awareness or your awareness. It is the clear, open space in which all phenomena arise and pass. This realization shifts our relationship to experience completely. We are no longer trapped in the drama of the personal self. We see that thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like clouds passing through the sky of awareness. The sky is unaffected by the clouds. It remains vast and open. In the same way, awareness remains untouched by the phenomena that arise within it. To rest in this awareness is the essence of observing without reacting. Of course, this does not mean that we become indifferent or passive. On the contrary, mindfulness makes us more fully alive, more fully engaged with reality. Because we are no longer reacting blindly, we can respond with wisdom and compassion. When someone speaks harshly, instead of reacting with anger, we can respond with understanding. When we see suffering, instead of reacting with avoidance, we can respond with kindness. Mindfulness transforms reaction into response, impulsivity into wisdom, agitation into peace. It is also important to recognize that mindfulness is not a quick fix. It is a lifelong practice, cultivated moment by moment. The mind will resist, the old patterns of reaction will persist, and there will be times when we fall back into reactivity. But every moment is an opportunity to return, to begin again. Each time we notice a reaction and return to observation, we strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. Over time, this practice reshapes the brain, rewires the nervous system, and transforms our entire way of being. Neuroscience now confirms what Buddhism has taught for centuries. Mindfulness changes the structure and function of the brain, increasing resilience, reducing reactivity, and enhancing well-being. But beyond these scientific findings lies a deeper truth. Mindfulness opens the door to liberation. The power of mindfulness can be illustrated through the practice of watching the breath. The breath is always present, always flowing, always changing. By anchoring our attention to the breath, we develop the ability to stay present. When the mind wanders, we gently return to the breath. This simple practice trains the mind to observe without reacting. We notice thoughts arising, but we do not chase them. We notice sensations, but we do not cling to them. We notice emotions, but we do not resist them. The breath becomes a mirror of impermanence, a reminder that everything arises and passes. In this practice, we cultivate patience, resilience, and clarity. Another powerful practice is body awareness. By scanning the body with mindfulness, we observe sensations without reacting. A pain in the leg, an itch on the skin, a tension in the shoulders, all of these sensations arise and pass. Normally, we react to them instantly. We shift position, we scratch, we resist. But in mindfulness practice, we learn to observe without reacting. We stay with the sensation, watching it as it changes without interfering. This teaches us directly that sensations are impermanent and that reactivity is optional. It also builds the capacity to face discomfort in life with equanimity, without being overwhelmed. Mindfulness also extends to thoughts. Normally, we believe our thoughts, identify with them, and react to them. A thought of worry arises, and we are carried into anxiety. A thought of anger arises, and we are carried into conflict. A thought of desire arises, and we are carried into craving. But with mindfulness, we observe thoughts as just thoughts. We see them as mental events arising in the field of awareness, not as truth. This changes everything. When we no longer identify with thoughts, we no longer react blindly to them. We gain the freedom to let them come and go without interference. This freedom is not abstract, it is deeply practical. Imagine being in a heated argument. Normally, words trigger instant reactions, escalating the conflict. But if mindfulness is present, we notice the rising anger in the body, the tightening in the chest, the racing thoughts. We pause, observe, and breathe. In that pause, we gain clarity. We may choose to speak calmly, to listen with openness, or to walk away. The situation is transformed because we did not react impulsively. This is the power of mindfulness in daily life. To cultivate this way of being requires patience and persistence. The mind will resist, craving stimulation and distraction. But each moment of mindfulness is a seed planted in the soil of awareness. With time and care, these seeds grow into a garden of clarity, peace, and wisdom. Observing without reacting becomes not just a practice, but a natural state of being. We live with greater ease, greater compassion, and greater freedom. Mindfulness reveals that the true strength of a human being is not in control or domination, but in presence and awareness. To sit quietly and observe without reacting is a profound act of courage. It is to face reality as it is, without hiding, without running, without clinging. In this stillness, we discover that we are not the waves of thought and emotion. We are the ocean of awareness in which they arise. This discovery is the essence of Buddhist wisdom and the key to liberation. If you feel inspired by this journey into mindfulness and its power to transform reactivity into freedom, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel so that we can continue exploring together the depth of Buddhist wisdom and the path to true peace. Cultivating equanimity, the heart of non-reactivity. Equanimity is one of the deepest treasures in Buddhist practice, the quality that allows us to remain steady in the face of life's turbulence, neither clinging to what is pleasant nor resisting what is unpleasant. If mindfulness is the ability to notice what is happening in the present moment, equanimity is the capacity to remain balanced in relation to it. Without equanimity, mindfulness can become fragile, easily overturned by strong emotions or powerful desires. But when equanimity is present, mindfulness gains stability, and the ability to observe without reacting matures into a profound way of being. To understand equanimity is to understand the art of being unshaken by the winds of change. The human condition is one of constant fluctuation. We are pulled in every direction by gain and loss, praise and blame, success and failure, pleasure and pain. These pairs of opposites, known in Buddhism as the 8 worldly winds, dominate much of human life. When we are praised, we feel elated. When we are blamed, we feel crushed. When we experience pleasure, we cling to it. When we experience pain, we resist it. In this way, we are tossed about endlessly, reacting to every shift of circumstance. But the Buddha taught that peace is found not in controlling the winds, but in cultivating the inner strength to remain steady, regardless of their direction. This strength is equanimity. Equanimity does not mean indifference. It is not a cold detachment that withdraws from life. On the contrary, it is a profound openness, a heart that remains present with all experiences without being enslaved by them. To be equanimous is to fully feel joy when it arises, fully feel sorrow when it arises, but not to be carried away by either. It is to embrace the totality of life while standing on the ground of awareness. In this way, equanimity is the true foundation of observing without reacting. It allows us to witness the drama of life without becoming entangled in it, to participate fully without being consumed. The cultivation of equanimity begins with the recognition of impermanence. When we see deeply that all things are transient, we stop clinging to them. We no longer believe that pleasure will last forever or that pain will never end. We see that everything arises and passes, like clouds drifting across the sky. This realization softens our grip on experience. Instead of reacting with desperation when something pleasant arises, we enjoy it with awareness, knowing it will pass. Instead of reacting with aversion when something unpleasant arises, we endure it with patience, knowing it too will pass. Impermanence becomes the great teacher of equanimity. Equanimity also arises from understanding the nature of suffering. Life inevitably contains pain, loss, and disappointment. No one escapes this truth. When we resist suffering, we multiply it, adding the pain of aversion to the pain of the moment. But when we accept suffering as part of the human condition, we meet it with equanimity. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It means facing reality as it is without denial. This acceptance opens the heart to compassion, because when we see that suffering is universal, we no longer feel singled out by fate. We realize that all beings are touched by the same winds, and this realization deepens both our equanimity and our empathy. Another foundation of equanimity is the understanding of non-self. When we identify strongly with the ego, we take everything personally. An insult feels like an attack on our very being, and a compliment feels like validation of our worth. But when we see that the self is not a solid entity, that it is a flow of conditions without inherent existence, we stop clinging to personal identity. We see that insults and compliments are just sounds, passing vibrations in the air, not truths about who we are. In this way, non-self liberates us from the endless cycle of personal reactivity. Equanimity blossoms as we realize that we are not the egoic story, but the awareness in which all stories arise and pass. Equanimity is cultivated through meditation practice. One of the most profound methods is the practice of loving kindness and compassion, extended to all beings equally. Normally, we divide the world into categories: friends, enemies, and strangers. We react to each differently, favoring some, resisting others, and ignoring the rest. But through the cultivation of loving kindness, we dissolve these boundaries, wishing well-being for all without distinction. This broadens the heart and deepens equanimity because we stop reacting with attachment to those we love and with aversion to those we dislike. Instead, we hold all beings in the spaciousness of compassion. Another practice that strengthens equanimity is sitting with discomfort. When we meditate and resist the urge to move at the first sign of pain or restlessness, we learn to observe discomfort without reacting. We notice how the sensation arises, changes, and passes. We realize that we can remain steady even when the body or mind is agitated. This practice builds resilience, teaching us that we are not at the mercy of every sensation. Over time, this resilience extends into daily life. When challenges arise, we are less likely to be shaken because we have trained the mind to rest in equanimity. Equanimity is also nurtured through wisdom. The more we understand the nature of reality, the less we react blindly to it. When we see that pleasure is fleeting, we do not cling to it desperately. When we see that pain is impermanent, we do not despair. When we see that gain and loss are part of life, we do not attach our worth to them. Wisdom reveals the futility of reactivity and the peace of equanimity. It shows us that the true measure of a life is not how much we control external conditions, but how deeply we cultivate inner balance. In daily life, equanimity manifests as calmness in the midst of chaos. Imagine being in a workplace filled with stress, deadlines, and conflicts. Without equanimity, we are pulled into the storm, reacting with anxiety or frustration. But with equanimity, we remain centered, responding with clarity and composure. Others may lose their temper, but we maintain patience. Others may panic, but we remain steady. This steadiness does not come from suppressing emotions, but from observing them without reacting, allowing them to arise and pass without control over our actions. Equanimity also transforms our relationships. Normally, we react strongly to the behavior of others. When people meet our expectations, we feel pleased. When they disappoint us, we feel hurt. This creates endless conflict and disappointment. But with equanimity, we accept that others are who they are, shaped by their own conditions and struggles. We no longer demand that they conform to our desires. We respond with understanding rather than judgment, patience rather than irritation. This does not mean we tolerate harm or injustice, but we approach situations with wisdom and balance, not with blind reactivity. The deepest expression of equanimity is freedom from fear. Fear arises when we cling to security, when we resist the uncertainty of life. But when equanimity is strong, we face uncertainty with courage. We accept that life is fragile, that everything changes, that death is inevitable. Instead of reacting with fear, we meet reality with openness. This openness brings a profound sense of peace, because we are no longer at war with the truth. We can live fully, love fully, and let go fully, because equanimity holds us steady in the midst of impermanence. Equanimity is not attained overnight. It is cultivated through patience and practice. Each time we observe an impulse to react and choose instead to remain balanced, we strengthen equanimity. Each time we face discomfort without running away, we strengthen equanimity. Each time we embrace both joy and sorrow without clinging or resisting, we strengthen equanimity. Slowly, the mind becomes less reactive, the heart more spacious, the presence more steady. When equanimity matures, life is no longer a battlefield of reactions. We live with a sense of inner dignity, rooted in awareness. We face success without arrogance, failure without despair, pleasure without attachment, pain without resistance. We discover the freedom of being unshaken by the winds of change. This is the heart of observing without reacting, the essence of Buddhist wisdom. In cultivating equanimity, we are not turning away from life, but entering more fully into it. We no longer need to protect ourselves with constant reaction, because we are secure in awareness itself. We no longer need to manipulate circumstances to feel safe, because safety is found in equanimity. We no longer need to cling to pleasure or resist pain, because we have learned to rest in the balance of being. This balance is the ground of true compassion, wisdom, and freedom. The path of equanimity is open to all. It requires no special status, no extraordinary conditions. It requires only the willingness to observe, to remain present, to let go of clinging and resistance. With each breath, with each moment, we can choose equanimity, and in that choice we find peace. If this exploration of equanimity and the art of observing without reacting resonates with you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel so that we may continue to walk together on the path of wisdom, balance, and inner freedom. Watching thoughts and emotions without identification. The greatest challenge in learning to observe without reacting is not external events, but the internal storm of thoughts and emotions. The outside world, with its changing circumstances and unpredictable situations, certainly provokes reactions, but it is within the mind itself that the true battle takes place. Thoughts arise incessantly, pulling us into stories about the past and projections into the future. Emotions surge with such intensity that they seem to define our very identity. We say, "I am angry, I am sad, I am anxious," as though these states are who we are. Yet Buddhist wisdom teaches that these are not the essence of our being. They are temporary phenomena arising in the field of awareness. To observe without reacting is to watch thoughts and emotions as passing events, not as truths, not as the self. The untrained mind identifies with every thought that arises. A memory comes, and we are transported into nostalgia or regret. A plan emerges, and we are consumed by anticipation or worry. An opinion forms, and we cling to it as if it were reality itself. Thoughts are powerful precisely because we believe them. We rarely question whether a thought is true, useful, or necessary. We simply react. Yet when mindfulness is cultivated, we begin to see thoughts for what they are: mental events, ephemeral patterns of energy. They arise, linger, and pass away. When we observe them without identification, we gain the freedom not to be enslaved by them. The same is true of emotions. Anger, fear, joy, sorrow, excitement, despair. Each of these states feels overwhelming when it arises. They flood the body with sensations, tighten the chest, quicken the breath, stir the mind. Because of their intensity, we tend to identify with them, believing that they define us. But emotions, like thoughts, are impermanent. They arise dependent on causes and conditions and dissolve when those conditions change. To observe an emotion without reacting is to allow it to flow through us like a wave, rising and falling without resistance. This practice reveals that we are not the emotion, but the awareness in which the emotion appears. Observing thoughts without reacting begins with mindfulness meditation. As we sit quietly and focus on the breath, thoughts inevitably arise. Instead of chasing them or fighting them, we simply note them, thinking. This simple act of noting creates distance. We recognize that the thought is not reality. It is just a thought. The mind may wander into a story about the past or a fantasy about the future, but the practice is always to return to the breath, to anchor ourselves in the present. Over time, this practice weakens the identification with thought. We learn that we do not need to follow every story the mind creates. We can watch thoughts like clouds drifting through the sky without clinging to them or pushing them away. The same principle applies to emotions. When anger arises, instead of reacting with aggression, we observe the heat in the body, the tightening of the jaw, the racing of the heart. When sadness arises, instead of being consumed by despair, we observe the heaviness in the chest, the tearfulness in the eyes, the quality of the mind. We note these sensations without judgment, without identification. We allow the emotion to exist without fueling it. In doing so, we discover that emotions have a natural life cycle. They arise, peak, and dissolve, like waves returning to the ocean. By observing them with awareness, we break the cycle of reactivity that keeps them alive. One of the most powerful insights that comes from this practice is the realization that thoughts and emotions are not enemies. Many people misunderstand meditation as an attempt to stop thinking or to suppress feelings, but this is not the Buddhist way. The practice is not to eliminate thoughts or emotions, but to change our relationship to them. Instead of being ruled by them, we become their witness. Instead of reacting blindly, we observe with clarity. In this way, thoughts and emotions become teachers, showing us the impermanence of all phenomena and the spaciousness of awareness. This shift in relationship is transformative. Imagine being caught in a wave of anxiety. Normally, we would react with worry, trying to solve imagined problems or escape the feeling, but with awareness, we pause and observe. This is anxiety. It feels like tightness in the chest, racing thoughts, restlessness in the body. By observing, we create space. We realize that anxiety is not who we are, but a passing state. This recognition reduces its power. We are no longer drowning in anxiety. We are standing on the shore, watching the wave rise and fall. The practice of observing without reacting also reveals the emptiness of thoughts and emotions. They seem so real when we are identified with them, but when we observe them, we see that they have no substance. A thought is just a flicker of energy, gone as quickly as it came. An emotion is just a combination of sensations and mental formations, dissolving with time. This realization liberates us from the grip of mental and emotional storms. We see that we do not need to cling to pleasant states or resist unpleasant ones. We can rest in awareness, knowing that all states are temporary. This does not mean that we become detached or unfeeling. On the contrary, when we stop reacting to thoughts and emotions, we create space for compassion and wisdom to arise. When we are no longer consumed by anger, we can respond with understanding. When we are no longer overwhelmed by fear, we can act with courage. When we are no longer lost in desire, we can experience true contentment. Observing without reacting does not make us less human. It makes us more fully human, because we are no longer enslaved by unconscious patterns. A powerful metaphor often used in Buddhism is that of the sky and the clouds. Awareness is the sky, vast and unchanging. Thoughts and emotions are the clouds drifting across the sky. Sometimes the sky is filled with storm clouds, dark and heavy. Sometimes it is clear and bright. But the sky itself remains untouched. When we identify with thoughts and emotions, we live in the clouds, constantly buffeted by their movement. But when we rest in awareness, we live in the sky, vast and free, watching the clouds come and go. This shift is the essence of observing without reacting. In daily life, the practice of observing thoughts and emotions without reacting transforms the way we experience challenges. Imagine being criticized at work. Normally the thought, "I am not good enough," might arise, followed by emotions of shame or anger. These would trigger reactive behavior such as defensiveness or withdrawal. But with awareness, we notice the thought as just a thought, the emotion as just a sensation. We pause, breathe, and choose how to respond. Perhaps we listen calmly, perhaps we explain our perspective, perhaps we let the comment go. The situation is no longer controlled by automatic reactivity, it is guided by awareness. The same is true in relationships. When a loved one behaves in a way that triggers irritation, instead of reacting with harsh words, we observe the irritation as a passing emotion. We notice the tightness in the chest, the urge to speak sharply. By observing, we create space. We may still address the behavior, but we do so with calmness rather than reactivity. This preserves harmony and deepens understanding. In this way, the practice of observing without reacting brings peace not only within ourselves, but also in our relationships. To cultivate this capacity requires patience. The habit of identification is strong. We have spent our entire lives believing our thoughts and identifying with our emotions. To break this habit, we must practice again and again. Each time we notice a thought and let it go, we weaken identification. Each time we feel an emotion without reacting, we strengthen awareness. Over time, this practice becomes natural. We begin to live more in awareness than in reactivity. The freedom that comes from this practice is profound. We discover that we are not at the mercy of our thoughts and emotions. We can experience them fully without being controlled by them. We can live with openness and clarity, responding with wisdom rather than reacting blindly. This freedom is the essence of Buddhist wisdom, the fruit of observing without reacting. When we learn to watch thoughts and emotions without identification, we discover a deeper truth. Awareness itself is the true refuge. It is the space in which all experiences arise and pass. It is not touched by thoughts, not shaken by emotions, not bound by the conditions of the world. To rest in awareness is to rest in peace. This peace is not dependent on circumstances, not dependent on the absence of pain or difficulty. It is the peace of freedom, the peace of knowing that we are not the passing phenomena, but the awareness in which they appear. In this realization, life is transformed. We still experience thoughts and emotions, joys and sorrows, but we are no longer enslaved by them. We live with equanimity, compassion, and wisdom. We respond to life with clarity, not with reactivity. We discover the true power of observing without reacting, the power of freedom. If you find value in this deep exploration of observing thoughts and emotions without identification, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so that together we may continue this journey into the heart of Buddhist wisdom and the liberation it offers. Living the practice, bringing observation without reaction into daily life. The teachings of Buddhism are not meant to remain as abstract philosophy or confined to the meditation cushion. Their true purpose is transformation in daily living, in the way we engage with the ordinary and extraordinary moments that make up our human existence. To learn to observe without reacting is to fundamentally reshape the way we move through the world. It is to carry the wisdom of mindfulness and equanimity into the marketplace, into the workplace, into our homes, into our relationships, and into the hidden corners of our own minds. It is in the laboratory of everyday life that the depth of Buddhist practice is tested and revealed. Observing without reacting is not about withdrawal. It is about entering fully into life while maintaining inner freedom. Each day presents us with countless opportunities to practice. The ringing of a phone, the honking of a horn, the unexpected request from a colleague, the criticism of a family member, the surge of joy at a piece of good news. All of these are invitations to notice the arising of reactivity and to choose awareness instead. When the phone rings, does impatience arise? When it does, can we notice it instead of acting on it? When traffic delays us, does frustration build? Can we observe the tightening in the body, the rush of thoughts, without letting them dictate our mood? When someone praises us, does pride inflate? Can we smile at the pleasant sensation without clinging to it? Life becomes the field of practice, every moment an opportunity to choose observation over reaction. One of the most powerful ways to integrate this practice is through mindful speech. Words are perhaps the most common medium of reactivity. A careless word can spark conflict, a defensive reply can escalate tension, a reactive statement can cause long-lasting harm. But when we observe without reacting, we learn to pause before speaking. We notice the impulse to reply harshly, the urge to defend, the desire to impress. Instead of reacting, we breathe, observe, and choose words rooted in wisdom and compassion. This simple pause transforms communication. It prevents harm, preserves harmony, and turns conversations into opportunities for understanding. The same is true for listening. Often when others speak, we are not truly listening. We are preparing our response, judging their words, or reacting internally. Observing without reacting teaches us to listen with openness. We notice our internal responses, agreement, disagreement, irritation, excitement, but we do not let them control us. We remain present with the speaker, fully attentive. This kind of listening is rare and precious. It creates space for genuine connection, for empathy, for healing. It is one of the greatest gifts we can offer in relationships. Another area where this practice transforms daily life is in dealing with emotions. Modern life is filled with stress, uncertainty, and pressure. Anxiety, anger, sadness, and desire arise frequently. Without awareness, we react to these emotions automatically. We lash out in anger, withdraw in sadness, obsess in anxiety, chase after desire. But with the practice of observation, we notice the emotion as it arises. We feel the bodily sensations, hear the thoughts that accompany it, sense the impulse to act. Instead of being consumed, we remain the witness. We allow the emotion to unfold and pass. In this way, we cultivate resilience. We face difficulties with patience, not with panic. We respond to challenges with clarity, not with chaos. Even the most mundane tasks become opportunities for practice. Washing dishes, walking to the store, eating a meal, each of these can be done with awareness. Normally we rush through them, lost in thought, reacting to internal restlessness. But when we bring mindfulness, we observe without reacting. We notice the warm water on the hands, the movement of the feet, the taste of the food. We do not need to change anything. We simply remain present. This transforms ordinary life into sacred practice. We discover joy in simplicity, peace in the everyday, freedom in the present moment. Observing without reacting also transforms our relationship to desire. Desire is a powerful force driving much of human behavior. We desire possessions, status, pleasure, recognition. Normally, when desire arises, we react by chasing it. If satisfied, we cling to it. If frustrated, we suffer. But with awareness, we notice desire as a sensation in the body, a thought in the mind. We observe its impermanence, how it shifts and changes. We realize that we do not need to act on every desire. This does not mean rejecting all joy, but it means enjoying without clinging, appreciating without craving. In this freedom, we find contentment. The same applies to aversion. We dislike discomfort, criticism, failure, uncertainty. Normally, when aversion arises, we react by resisting, fighting, or fleeing. But with awareness, we notice the sensation of resistance. We feel the tension, the urge to escape, By observing without reacting, we learn to endure discomfort with patience. We discover that we can remain steady even in unpleasant circumstances. This builds strength and courage. Life no longer needs to be arranged for our comfort. We can face it as it is, with equanimity. Perhaps the greatest test of this practice comes in relationships. Human interactions are filled with triggers for reactivity. Misunderstandings, disagreements, betrayals, expectations. All of these stir powerful emotions. Without awareness, relationships become battlegrounds of reaction. But when we practice observing without reacting, relationships become arenas for growth. Instead of reacting with anger when hurt, we observe the pain, breathe, and respond with honesty and kindness. Instead of reacting with jealousy, we notice the insecurity, observe it, and choose trust. Instead of reacting with judgment, we notice the impulse and choose compassion. Relationships flourish in this space of awareness because we are no longer imprisoned by unconscious reactions. This practice also changes our relationship with ourselves. Often, we are our harshest critics, reacting to our own mistakes with judgment and self-hatred. But when we observe without reacting, we meet ourselves with compassion. We notice the thought, "I failed," the emotion of shame, the impulse to punish ourselves. Instead of reacting, we observe, breathe, and offer kindness. We learn to accept our humanity, our imperfections, our growth. This self-compassion is not indulgence but wisdom, for it allows us to grow without the burden of self-hatred. The practice of observing without reacting also has profound implications for society. Much of the conflict in the world arises from collective reactivity, groups reacting to fear, anger, or desire. Wars, discrimination, injustice, all are fueled by unexamined emotions. If individuals cultivate the capacity to observe without reacting, society itself becomes less reactive. Decisions are made with wisdom rather than impulse, with compassion rather than fear. This is why Buddhist practice is not only personal, but also profoundly social. Inner peace becomes the foundation for outer peace. Yet it is important to acknowledge that this practice is not easy. The pull of reactivity is strong. There will be times when we fail, when we are swept away by anger or fear. But even these moments are opportunities for practice. After reacting, we can reflect with awareness. I was carried away by anger. What did it feel like? What triggered it? How did it pass? In this reflection, even failure becomes a teacher. We learn from our reactions and strengthen our resolve to observe more deeply next time. To live this practice requires patience, persistence, and humility. It is not about perfection, but about progress. Each moment of observation is a victory. Each pause before reacting is a step toward freedom. Each breath taken in awareness is a seed of peace. Over time, these seeds grow into a life rooted in clarity, compassion, and equanimity. The ultimate fruit of living this way is freedom. Freedom from being enslaved by thoughts, freedom from being consumed by emotions, freedom from being controlled by circumstances. This freedom does not mean we are untouched by life, but that we are no longer bound by it. We feel deeply, love deeply, engage fully, but remain grounded in awareness. We participate in the dance of life without losing ourselves in its movements. This is the essence of observing without reacting, to live fully, freely, and wisely. As the Buddha taught, the path to liberation is not outside us, but within. It is not about changing the world, but about changing our relationship to it. By learning to observe without reacting, we discover that the mind can be steady, the heart can be open, and awareness can be free. This discovery is the true treasure of Buddhist wisdom. In this journey through the roots of reaction, the power of mindfulness, the cultivation of equanimity, the practice of watching thoughts and emotions without identification, and the integration of these teachings into daily life, we have seen that observing without reacting is not a small skill, but a profound transformation. It changes the way we experience ourselves, others, and the world. It frees us from the endless cycle of craving and aversion, from the chains of fear and ego, from the turbulence of unconscious living. It opens the door to peace, compassion, and wisdom. The practice is simple but not easy. It requires attention, patience, and persistence. It asks us to face ourselves honestly, to embrace impermanence, to let go of clinging. But the reward is immeasurable. The freedom to live with clarity, the strength to face life with courage, the joy of being fully present. This is the promise of Buddhist wisdom, the gift of observing without reacting. If you have found inspiration in these teachings and wish to continue exploring the path of mindfulness, equanimity, and inner freedom, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. Together we can deepen our understanding, support each other in practice, and walk the path of wisdom toward true liberation.